Welcome back to another edition of Diamond Star Stories. Today's item is a 1935 Diamond Stars, Bill DeLancey. It says greenback on the card, and it's kind of a little bit misleading because the bluebacks are all 1936, so it isn't really needed. It's a bit redundant. Wanted to talk a little bit about Bill himself. This is a card I picked up just 2 months ago. Got it right at the end of June, and I'm really happy to be able to kind of share this with you. It's one of the better examples I have from the Diamond Star sets. As you can see, it's a very good, excellent 4.5. It's got great registration, decent centering. There's not any significant creasing anywhere throughout the card. And it's just got a wonderful color combination, as you can kind of see with the blue background behind the dugout with a multicolored field of like yellows and oranges and greens. The brownish kind of looking tarp, and then obviously two players in the background, one with obviously the warm-up jacket on and the other not. But the birds and the bat on this uniform really have a nice little detail on there, which was a pretty famous part of their uniform throughout their history. So it's nice that it's included on this St. Louis Cardinal card, whereas in others it isn't. So Bill DeLancey, he had a very brief career, not because he wasn't good, it's actually because something else a little bit more tragic. He was born in 1911 on November 28th. Oddly enough, is also going to be the same day he passed away. Many years later in 1946, he was signed originally by Branch Rickey, and he was in the minor league systems for 2 seasons. Debuted briefly in the 1932 season, went back down in 33, and was up to stay in 1935 as a platoon player with Spud Davis for the better part of 34 and 5. In 1934, not the White Sox, but the St. Louis Cardinals actually were in the World Series against the Detroit Tigers. This is the same World Series that went 7 games and is famous for Dizzy Dean getting hit in the head. And also with when he was sliding in second, but also with the Game 7 incident where Joe Medwick had to be removed from the field for his own safety. And the Cardinals went on to win that World Series, and Bill DeLancey was a platoon catcher for most of that season, but by the time they got to the World Series, Frankie Fritsch, their player-manager, Hall of Fame player-manager, decided to actually have Bill play in the field, and he played all the World Series games. He played all 7. Went 5 for 29 and also hit a home run in one of the games at Sportsman's Park and drove in 4 RBIs as the Cardinals went on to win the World Series in 1934. He played that same role again in 1935, but then after the 1935 season, he contracted tuberculosis and was out of baseball as a player for many years thereafter, even though he came back as a manager for 3 years and managed in Albuquerque, New Mexico with a Class D team. He started to feel a little bit better and played a little bit on the field towards the end of his minor league stint there, and returned to the Cardinals briefly as their 3rd-string catcher in 1940. But that was all he was pretty much able to manage with his health before then going back and becoming a minor league manager for the parts of 41 and 42 before the minor leagues were kind of greatly reduced and shut down as a result of World War II at that time. Branch Rickey compared him later in his life, compared him very much to a young Cardinal catcher that he was pretty fond of in the early parts of the 1960s when Branch Rickey, I think, was working for the Pittsburgh Pirates organization at that point. And that catcher was Tim McCarver. He said that Tim McCarver reminded him a lot of Bill DeLancey. Branch Rickey was a huge fan of Bill DeLancey, as you can kind of see in his comments here. He thought he was one of the better fielding catchers he'd ever seen, and that he had a really solid bat and would have gone on to have a great career if he wasn't have his career cut short because of getting tuberculosis. During the really just 2 seasons he's played, so he had 4 major league seasons, but only 2 where he was actually featured as a starter pretty consistently. In 1934, he had his best season. He hit .316, 13 home runs, and 40 RBIs as a platoon catcher. Had some similar numbers the following year, and then that was about it. After the 35 season, he didn't return again until 1940, as I kind of mentioned. But just in those 2 years, he was able to get a 3.2 WAR in just 219 games, and his 162 game average is actually pretty solid, and probably would have been a big contributor of the St. Louis Cardinal teams if he had been healthy for many years thereafter. It wasn't all doom and gloom. He was able to marry in 1931, and they had 2 children, including one shortly before his passing. Thinking at the time, if somebody had contracted tuberculosis, you wanted to kind of get them into the desert air, that was a good treatment for it at that point, or at least kind of like made the symptoms a lot less. So he and his wife moved to Phoenix, Arizona, which is where unfortunately he passed away in 1946, and he is buried at this point now. So just this is kind of a cool, and learning about these players. This was not somebody I ever would have learned about if I wasn't putting this set together, and probably never would have featured if I thought the set was too big to kind of break it down card by card. But I'm really happy to be able to share this with you, not just because of this picture and this image, but because of the story. And this is not the first time I actually saw this card. The first time I had experience with this was just earlier this spring when I was in St. Louis, and I went to the St. Louis Cardinal Hall of Fame. They had a little part of one of their exhibits, had some old baseball cards from the 1930s, 20s, and 40s. And this was the one card that was featured in that display. And that was the first time I had ever seen that card. And I'm like, well, that looks really cool. I would love to be able to pick up that card at some point. Little did I know, it's just within like 2.5 months later, it was going to be up for auction, and I put in a competitive bid and actually was able to pick that one up along with one other item in this set that I'll feature at a later date. So I'm really happy to have this card in my set, and I'm happy to be able to share it with you all. So have a great rest of your day.